Millionaire was left alone in the desert until a poor wanderer found him. Richard Mitchell woke up with a mouth as dry as sandpaper and the sun beating down on his already sunburned face. His legs were completely buried in the scorching sand of the Florida wasteland, and no matter how hard he tried to move, he couldn't free himself from the sand trap someone had set for him. The 38-year-old businessman tried to scream for help, but his voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Then, a woman appeared on the horizon, walking slowly between the dunes with a torn cloth bag on her back. She wore a brown scarf shielding her graying hair from the relentless sun, and her simple clothes were covered in dust. "Oh my God, what are you doing there?" the woman asked, approaching carefully. Richard tried to speak, but only a groan escaped his parched throat. The stranger pulled an almost empty water bottle from her bag and offered it to him. "Drink slowly, my son, slowly." The millionaire's pride wanted to refuse the help of this ragged woman, but his thirst was stronger than his arrogance. He desperately gulped down the last drops of water left in the bottle. "I'm Grace," the woman said, starting to dig the sand around him with her calloused hands. "And you're Richard Mitchell, right? I've seen your picture in the papers. The richest man in Florida." Richard was shocked to be recognized. How did this simple woman know who he was? "How do you know me?" "Son, everyone around here knows the owner of Mitchell Enterprises, the company that tore down half of Riverside to build a mall." The businessman felt a chill run down his spine. Riverside was a community he had seized 6 months ago to construct a shopping center, but that was just business, nothing personal. "Ma'am, if you help me out of here, I'll pay you well, whatever you want." Grace stopped digging and looked him straight in the eyes. "First, I need to understand how you ended up here. No one comes to this part of the wasteland by accident." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. Richard tried to recall the last events. He had left Miami the night before with his personal driver, Mike, for a business meeting in Orlando. After that, everything in his memory became hazy. My driver, Mike. He must be looking for me. Grace kept digging in silence, but her hands trembled. When she found Richard's broken phone buried in the sand, along with some scattered business cards, she examined them carefully. "Mike Wilson. That name sounds familiar," she murmured. "You know my driver?" The woman didn't answer right away. She kept working to free the businessman's legs, but now there was something different in her movements, a tension that hadn't been there before. "Yes, I do. Mike is my nephew." Richard felt as if the world had stopped. The driver he'd trusted for 2 years was this woman's nephew. How was that possible? That can't be true. "Mike lost his job at your company 3 months ago, remember? He questioned some of the wrong things you were doing." Richard's memory began to clear. There had been an employee named Mike Wilson who was fired for asking uncomfortable questions about the property seizures, but he'd never connected his current driver with that former employee. "He never told me he'd worked for me before, because he came back under a different name on the paperwork, using his father's last name, Mike Chambers. You didn't even check properly, did you?" The businessman felt another chill run down his spine. He had been betrayed by someone who lived with him daily, who knew all his routines, all his commitments. Grace finally managed to free his legs, but when Richard tried to stand up, he immediately collapsed onto the sand. His legs were completely numb. "Take it easy, son. It'll take a while before you can feel your legs again. Why are you helping me knowing who I am?" The woman sat on the sand beside him and pulled out a stale piece of bread from her bag, breaking it in half and offering him a piece. "Because my mother taught me that we help those in need, no matter who they are. Eat a little, you'll need your strength." Richard, accustomed to lavish meals at 5-star restaurants, ate the dry bread with a gratitude he'd never felt before. The hunger was real, desperate. "You said you're out here looking for medicinal herbs." "Yes, my granddaughter's sick. Emma's only 8 and has a fever that won't go away. Pharmacy medicine is too expensive, so I look for the herbs my grandmother taught me about." "And you wander the Florida wasteland alone for days?" "Just like the women in my family always have. When times get tough, we do what we must." The sun began to set. painting the sky orange and red. Grace helped Richard stand slowly, supporting him as he tried to regain feeling in his legs. "We need to find shelter for the night. There's a cave up ahead." During the slow, painful walk, Richard fainted twice. The second time, Grace carried him on her back for over a mile, stopping only when she couldn't take another step. "Grace, you didn't have to do this for me." "I know I didn't, but I did." When they reached the small cave, they found supplies left by other travelers, an old blanket, some canned food, and a jug of dirty but still drinkable water. "Other wanderers pass through here," Grace explained. "We always leave something behind for the next ones." That night, Richard had terrible nightmares. He saw the families who'd lost their homes because of his enterprises, children crying, elders with nowhere to go. He woke several times in a cold sweat. The third time he woke, he found Grace kneeling at the cave entrance, hands clasped. "Are you praying?" "I'm praying for you, son, and for my granddaughter, and for Mike, too." "Why pray for your nephew when he's the one who betrayed me?" Grace turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Because he wasn't always like this. Mike was always a good boy. But after he lost his job, after his wife left him, after he couldn't afford his daughter's treatment anymore, he changed. He has a daughter, Sophia. She's had heart problems since birth. Mike spent all his savings on doctors, lost his home, lost everything. When he found out you were the reason he lost his first job..." The woman couldn't finish. Richard began to grasp the weight of his responsibility. These weren't just numbers on spreadsheets or profit reports. They were real lives, real families affected by his decisions. "Where's Sophia now?" "In the hospital. Mike's desperate, doing anything to get money for her treatment." The next day, they resumed their walk. Grace had slept only 2 hours but insisted on continuing. Her granddaughter needed the medicine. "Did Mike come to you before doing this to me?" "He did. Came to my house 3 weeks ago crying like a child. Said he was going to do something he'd regret, but it was the only way to get money for Sophia." "And you tried to stop him?" "I did. But when a father sees his daughter suffering, sometimes we do things we never imagined we could do." Richard walked in silence, absorbing those words. He had never been a father, had never felt that kind of desperation. "Do you have children?" "I had 3, Anthony, John, and Mary. Anthony worked at your company." The businessman stopped walking. "What do you mean, worked at my company?" "Anthony Wilson. He was fired the same day as Mike for supporting his nephew. They were friends." Another revelation that left Richard stunned. How many people had his company hurt? How many families? "Where is your son now?" "Working on a farm in Texas. He earns half what he used to, but at least he has a job." "And John and Mary?" "John's in Los Angeles trying to make it. Mary is closer than you think." Grace said this with a mysterious tone that intrigued Richard, but before he could ask more, she pointed to the horizon. "Look, animal tracks. Let's follow them. They might lead us to water." They followed the tracks for hours under the scorching sun. Grace shared the last bit of water she had with Richard, even knowing she might need it for her long journey. When they finally found a small oasis, Richard wanted to stay there forever. The cool water, the shade of the palm trees, the feeling of safety. But Grace was restless. "We can't stay too long. Emma's waiting. A few more hours won't make a difference." For someone who's never seen a child with a high fever, it might not seem like it, but every hour counts. The determination of that woman impressed Richard. She had saved his life, carried him on her back, shared her food and water, and yet her priority was getting to her sick granddaughter. "Why didn't you bring Emma to the hospital?" "With what money? The nearest clinic is 50 kilometers from our home. And when we get there, they just give us painkillers for everything." "But there are private hospitals." "In your world, there are. In my world, there's only what we can afford." Richard had never thought of it that way. For him, there had always been private doctors, premium health plans, top-tier hospitals. Grace's reality was completely different. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. As evening fell, they spotted a dirt road in the distance. Richard's heart raced with hope of being rescued, but Grace seemed worried. "What's wrong, Grace?" "I'm thinking about what'll happen when we reach town. You'll go back to your life and I'll go back to mine, as if none of this ever happened." "That's not true. You saved me, I won't forget." "I've heard that before, my son. The rich make many promises when they're in need, but afterward..." A cargo truck stopped when it saw the two on the road. The driver, a middle-aged man with a dirty cap, got out and recognized Richard immediately. "Hey, aren't you the businessman who went missing? The radio's been saying you vanished 3 days ago." 3 days? Richard was confused. He was sure only 2 nights had passed in the wasteland. "Yeah, your family's desperate. They think it was a kidnapping." In the truck, Richard called his lawyer using the driver's phone. The conversation was tense and revealing. "Richard, where the hell have you been? Your daughter Jennifer took over as company president, claiming you abandoned your post. She said you ran off with investors' money." "What? That's a lie. She has documents signed by you authorizing transfers from multiple accounts, and worse, she fired half the staff yesterday." Richard felt his world collapsing. His own daughter had turned against him, using his disappearance to take control of the company he had built over 15 years. "How is this possible? I never signed any of this." "The documents bear your signature, and there are witnesses." Grace, who had been listening silently, placed her hand on his shoulder. Her simple touch brought a comfort Richard hadn't expected. "Do you have a personal assistant?" she asked softly. "Yes, I do. Kevin manages my entire schedule." "How long has he worked for you?" "About 2 years." "Why?" Grace exchanged a meaningful look with him. "Kevin wouldn't happen to be Kevin Wilson, would he?" Richard's blood ran cold. "How do you know his last name?" "Because Kevin is my son. My middle child. John Kevin Wilson. He started using only his middle name after he began working for you." The phone slipped from Richard's hands. This couldn't be happening. His personal assistant, the man who organized his life, who had access to all his documents, who knew his passwords, was the son of the woman who had just saved his life. "Grace, this can't be true. I can prove it. Kevin has a scar on his right arm, close to his wrist, from when he fell out of a tree as a child." Richard remembered the scar perfectly. He had asked about it once, and Kevin said it was from a childhood accident. "But why did he never tell me he knew you?" "Because I asked him not to. I said it was better that way, that I didn't want to mix things up." "Did you know he was planning this?" Grace took a deep breath before answering. "Kevin came to see me the same day Mike did. The two of them were working together. Kevin found out you were responsible for firing his father, and Mike told him about Sophia in the hospital. And you tried to stop them?" "I did, but they were blinded by anger, and there were others involved." "Who else?" "Your daughter." The truck stopped at a tire shop in the town of Tampa. Richard insisted on accompanying Grace to her home before dealing with his business troubles. "You don't have to, my son. You have more important things to handle. There's nothing more important than meeting Emma and making sure she'll be okay." Grace's home was a humble shack on the outskirts of town, with bare brick walls and a corrugated roof. Inside, an 8-year-old girl burned with fever on a double bed that took up nearly the entire room. "Grandma, you're back," Emma murmured weakly. "Yes, my dear, and I brought help." Richard knelt beside the bed and saw in the girl's eyes the same strength and dignity he had found in Grace. "Hi, Emma. I'm Richard, the man Grandma saved in the wasteland. She told you about me. Grandma tells me everything. She said she'd bring medicine for my fever." Grace showed the herbs she had gathered during their journey. They were the same plants her grandmother had used decades ago to treat fevers and infections. "Let me call my personal doctor," Richard said. "You don't have to trouble yourself. Grace, after everything you've done for me, it's the least I can do." The doctor arrived in less than an hour with a full ambulance. After examining Emma, he diagnosed a severe infection that could have led to serious complications if left untreated. "It's good you brought her now. A few more days, and it could have gotten much worse." As Emma was taken to the hospital, Grace refused to go along. I don't have the right clothes for a private hospital. Grace, you just saved my life. You can go anywhere as you are. At the hospital, while Emma received medical care, Grace and Richard had a conversation that would change everything. Why did you save me, knowing I had hurt your family? Because holding on to anger in your heart doesn't solve anything, it only hurts more. But your son Kevin, Mike, all of them have reasons to hate me. They do, and I won't lie and say I wasn't upset when I found out what your company did, but choosing hate means choosing to live in the past. At that moment, the hospital doors swung open and Kevin Wilson rushed in, pale as a sheet. Behind him came Mike and a young blonde woman around 25. Mom, I heard you brought Emma to the hospital. How did you get the money for... Kevin stopped mid-sentence when he saw Richard. What are you doing here? Kevin, Grace said firmly, now I understand why you didn't want me to tell anyone I was your mother. Mike avoided looking directly at Richard, but the young blonde stepped forward with a defiant expression. Dad, what a coincidence running into you here. It was Jennifer, his daughter. The final puzzle piece clicked in Richard's mind. Are you involved in this, Jennifer? I'm trying to save our company from your incompetence. By robbing accounts and forging documents, using the same methods you always have, the difference is I'm more efficient. The family confrontation unfolded right there in the hospital hallway, in front of Grace and her entire family. No violence, just words heavy with years of pent-up resentment. Jennifer, I always gave you everything you wanted. You gave me money, Dad. Never attention, affection, or time. You raised a machine just like yourself. And you thought tearing down everything I built was the answer. I'm not tearing it down. I'm making it better, without your guilty conscience holding the business back. Kevin moved closer to his mother, tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. You always taught me to do what's right, and you did what you thought was best for your cousins. I won't judge you for that. But it was wrong. Yes, it was. But mistakes are part of learning. Mike, who had stayed silent, finally approached Richard. Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry. Sophia's okay. We got the money for her treatment through Jennifer's plan, but I never wanted it to go this far. Where did you leave me, Mike? Somewhere I knew. I figured Mrs. Grace always passes through there when she picks up medicine. She'd find you. You planned all this. The part about leaving you there was mine. Jennifer and Kevin just wanted to take the company, but I wanted you to suffer a little, to understand what desperation feels like. Jennifer listened to this confession angrily. Mike, you shouldn't have done that. The plan was just to take over while he was away. But Grace was right, Mike continued. Revenge doesn't fix anything, it just creates more pain. Just then a doctor arrived with good news about Emma. The girl was responding well to treatment and would recover soon. Can I see her? Grace asked. Of course, and she's asking for you too, the doctor said, looking at Richard. In the room, Emma sat up in bed, looking much better. Her fever had gone down, and she smiled. Uncle Richard, Grandma said you were really brave in the wasteland. Truth is, your grandma was the brave one. She saved me. Grandma always saves everyone. It's her superpower. Grace laughed, wiping a tear. Not a superpower, sweetheart. Just love. In the days that followed, deep changes unfolded in everyone's lives. Richard, with his lawyer's help, proved the documents were forged and regained control of the company. But now everything was different. He created a support program for families harmed by the land seizures, offered decent jobs to Mike and Anthony, and hired Grace as a community consultant. Mrs. Grace, you have a wisdom my company needs. I only studied up to the 4th grade, my son. You have something no school can teach, compassion. Kevin confessed everything to the authorities and was sentenced to community service. He continued working for Richard, but now with complete transparency about their family relationship. Why didn't you fire me? Kevin asked. Because your mother taught me about second chances. Jennifer resisted the changes the most. Accustomed to a luxurious lifestyle and aggressive business tactics, she fought against the company's new direction. You're throwing money away with these social programs, Dad. I'm investing in something worth more than money. In what? In my soul. The transformation wasn't easy. There were setbacks, heated arguments, moments when Richard nearly gave up on change. Grace was there through it all, always with a word of encouragement or a comforting silence. "Sometimes I think I'm too old to change," Richard confessed during one of his visits to Grace's home. "Nonsense. A plant that stops growing withers. And you're far from withered." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, continuing. 6 months after the Florida wasteland incident, life had changed completely for everyone involved. Richard's company became a benchmark for social responsibility in Florida. Mike secured a stable job, and his daughter, Sophia, made a full recovery. Anthony returned from Texas to work as a supervisor for social projects. Mary, Grace's youngest daughter, revealed herself as the financial employee who had uncovered the irregularities in the documents forged by Jennifer. "You never told me Mary worked at my company," Richard said to Grace. "Because she asked me not to. Mary has always been discreet. She's been in accounting for 3 years and never wanted special treatment for being my daughter. She's the one who uncovered the fraud." "Yes. Mary alerted the auditors about the forged signatures. Without her, Jennifer would have taken your company for good." Another revelation, showing how Grace's family was intertwined with Richard's life in ways he never imagined. Jennifer still resisted the changes, but slowly began to understand what had happened to her father. The turning point came when she visited a family helped by the company's new programs. "This was our home before you tore it all down," said Mrs. Ruth, a 70-year-old woman who had lost her house in the Riverside expropriation. "But now you have a better home," Jennifer replied, trying to justify it. "Better is a matter of opinion, young lady. 3 generations of my family lived in that old house. This place is nice, but it has no history." That conversation left Jennifer deeply shaken. For the first time, she understood that behind every number in her spreadsheets was a real human story. "Dad, I want to help with the social programs," she said days later. "Are you sure?" "Yes. But I don't want special treatment for being your daughter. I want to start from the bottom, learn from people who truly understand this." "Like Mrs. Grace?" "Like Mrs. Grace." The father-daughter relationship, once destroyed by greed and ambition, began rebuilding on a stronger foundation, mutual respect, and a shared purpose to make a difference in people's lives. A year after the Florida wasteland incident, Richard organized a special celebration. It was Emma's birthday. She turned 9, fully healed and healthy. The party took place at the company's new community center, a space created specifically for employee families and the local community. Grace's entire family was present, along with the company employees and many of the families who had benefited from the new programs. "Uncle Richard," said Emma, approaching him with a drawing in her hands. "I made this for you." The drawing showed a man in a suit standing on desert sand with a woman in a headscarf offering him water. At the top, in colorful letters, it read, "The day Grandma saved Uncle Richard." Richard looked at the drawing and for the first time in many years cried in public, not from sadness or frustration, but from a deep gratitude he didn't know how to express. "It's beautiful, Emma. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever received. Why are you crying?" "Because sometimes we cry when we're very happy." Grace walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "My granddaughter draws well, doesn't she?" "Mrs. Grace, how can I ever thank you for everything you've done for me? By continuing to be the person you've become, that's all I need. But I want to do more. I want you and your family to have everything you need. We already do, my son. We have our health, dignified work, and a granddaughter who's healed. What more could we want?" In that moment, Richard understood the difference between wealth and prosperity. He had spent his whole life accumulating wealth, but only now was he experiencing true prosperity. Jennifer approached them, bringing Mike and Kevin along. "Dad, we wanted to talk to you about something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "We were thinking, what if we created a foundation? Something bigger than the company's programs, something that could help communities across Florida." Richard looked at Grace, who smiled in approval. "And you want me to fund this foundation?" "We want you to help," said Kevin. But the idea is for it to be supported by multiple businesses, not just ours. And who would run this foundation? Mrs. Grace, Mike answered without hesitation. She understands the needs of these communities better than anyone. Me? Grace was surprised. But I don't know anything about administration. You understand people, Jennifer said, and that's more important than any technical knowledge. Besides, Richard added, we can hire professional administrators, but the heart of the foundation has to be someone like you. Grace looked around at the hopeful faces of everyone who had become her extended family. If you all think I can help, we know you can, Emma said, running to hug her grandmother. Grandma, are you going to save more people like you saved Uncle Richard? We'll try, my dear, we'll try. 2 years had passed since the creation of the Grace Wilson Foundation, named in honor of the woman who had transformed so many lives. The foundation had already helped over 50 communities across Florida, offering everything from basic medical care to job training programs. Richard, now 40, had become a completely different person. He still ran his company successfully, but profits were no longer his only goal. He had found purpose in seeing entire families lift themselves out of poverty through the programs he supported. Jennifer, at 27, had become the foundation's executive director, working directly with Grace. The once ambitious and cold young woman had transformed into a compassionate leader dedicated to community well-being. Mother Grace, as Jennifer now called the elderly woman, the literacy program results from Clearwater are in. How did they do? 100% completion. All 50 participants finished the program. And the jobs? 42 are already employed. The other 8 start next month. Grace smiled with satisfaction. Those numbers represented real families, children who would now have a better future, hopes that had become reality. Jennifer, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. What is it, Mother Grace? Why did you change so much? What really made you see things differently? Jennifer thought for a moment before answering. It was when I realized my father hadn't changed out of self-interest or strategy. He changed because he saw the real suffering of people and couldn't ignore it anymore. And if a 40-year-old man could change so much, I had no excuse to keep being selfish at 25. And do you regret anything? I regret waiting so long to discover that helping others is more rewarding than any personal success. That evening, Richard arrived at the foundation headquarters with important news. Grace, Jennifer, you won't believe what happened. What is it? They asked together. I got a proposal from 3 businessmen from Los Angeles. They want to create a national network of foundations based on our model. National? Grace was startled. But that's too big for us. It's not just for us, Mrs. Grace. They want to create independent foundations in each state, all following the same principles you established here. And what would our role be? Asked Jennifer. We'd serve as consultants, helping train teams in other states. We'd share our experience. And how long would this take? 5 years to implement in all states. They estimate we could help over 1 million people. Grace fell silent for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of the proposal. 1 million people. That's so many. That's so many people who could have a better life because of everything you started, said Richard. I didn't start anything alone. We all built this together. But it all began when you decided to help a man buried in the sand, even knowing he'd hurt your family. I just did what anyone with a heart would do. No, Mrs. Grace, you did what a special person would do, and now that kindness could spread across the whole country. The next morning, the whole family gathered at Grace's house to make the final decision about the proposal. Present were Richard, Jennifer, Kevin, Mike, Anthony, Mary, and of course Emma, who was now 11 and always had an opinion on the family's big decisions. Grandma, if we accept this, will we have to travel a lot? Asked Emma. Yes, sweetheart. We'd have to go to other states to teach what we've learned here. And can I come too? Sometimes, yes, when it's school vacation. Then I think we should do it. That way I get to see the whole country and help even more people. Everyone laughed at the girl's simple but spot-on logic. And what do you all think? Grace asked her children. Mum, I think it's the chance to take your teachings to millions, said Anthony. How can we say no? And the company will fully support the project, added Richard. We'll create a special department to handle the expansion. Kevin, you're quiet. What are you thinking? Asked Grace. I'm thinking that 2 years ago I was planning to rob this man, he said, pointing at Richard. And today I'm here discussing how to help 1 million people. Our lives have changed so much it sometimes feels like a dream. It's not a dream, son, it's harvest. We planted love and compassion and now we're reaping the fruits. Mike, who had stayed quiet, spoke up. Mrs. Grace, do you remember when Kevin and I came to you, blind with anger, wanting revenge on Mr. Richard? I remember. You said something that never left my mind. Son, when we choose hatred, we choose to live in the past. When we choose forgiveness, we choose to live in the future. Now I understand what you meant. And what do you understand? That if we had gone through with the original plan, we'd be in prison or living with guilt today. But because you showed us another way, now we're here planning to help 1 million people. Mike's right, said Jennifer. Grace, when I first met you at the hospital, I saw you as an obstacle. Now I understand you were the one who saved not just my father, but our whole family. What do you mean, dear? If you hadn't shown him what true compassion is, I would have taken over the company and kept making the same mistakes he did. We'd be rich but empty. Now we're truly prosperous. Grace looked around the table, seeing all those faces she had learned to love as family. Then it's decided. We accept the proposal. A cheer of joy echoed through the house. Emma jumped into her grandmother's lap. Richard hugged Jennifer, and everyone embraced in a warm, joyful mess. But there's one condition, Grace said when the noise settled. In every state where the foundation is established, I want people from the communities themselves in leadership. Outsiders won't solve problems they don't understand. Perfect, Richard agreed. We'll include that in the proposal. 3 months later, the first national meeting took place in Miami. Business owners and community leaders from all over the country came to learn about the Grace Wilson Foundation's model. The event was held at the city's convention center, but Grace insisted part of the program take place at the Foundation's community headquarters so visitors could see the work in action. Grace, said Los Angeles businessman Robert Johnson, could you tell us how this all began? It began when I found a lost man in the Florida wasteland and decided to help him, even though I knew he had hurt my family. But why did you choose to help? Because my grandmother taught me that when you see someone suffering, the first question shouldn't be, do they deserve help, but how can I help? And when did you realize this could become something bigger? Grace looked at Richard, who was smiling in the audience. When I saw that powerful people can truly change, when I saw a man used to thinking only about profit, learn to think about people, then I understood that if he could change, anyone could. Do you believe this model can transform the country? I believe we can transform the world, one person at a time. And the country is made of people. By the end of the presentation, everyone there had committed to creating their own regional foundations. The dream of bringing compassion and opportunities to 1 million people was becoming reality. That evening, a special dinner celebrated the birth of the Grace Wilson National Network. During the celebration, Emma asked to speak. Can I say something? Everyone stopped to listen to the 11-year-old. I just think you adults make things way too complicated. Grandma saved Uncle Richard because it was the right thing to do. He changed because he saw he was hurting people. Then everyone changed together. Now you want to help more people. It's not complicated. Just love each other and do what's right. A respectful silence filled the room. A child's simple wisdom had summed up in a few words what had transformed all those lives. Emma's right, said Robert Johnson. Sometimes we forget the best solutions are the simplest. And children always know the right thing to do, added Grace. We're the ones who complicate things with pride, fear, and greed. Richard stood up to make the final toast of the evening. I want to toast Mrs. Grace, who taught me that saving a life sometimes means saving a soul. I want to toast all of you, who believed we could build a better country, and I especially want to toast Emma, who reminded us that doing good doesn't have to be complicated. And I, said Grace, standing as well, want to toast the power of forgiveness. because it was forgiveness that turned anger into love, revenge into justice, and hatred into compassion. 5 years had passed since that night. The Grace Wilson National Network had become a reality. 26 states now had their foundations operating, benefiting over 1.2 million people. Grace, now 68, had become a national figure in social responsibility. She received honorary degrees, international awards, and even spoke at the UN about poverty eradication. But to her, none of that mattered as much as seeing Emma, now 16, accepted into a federal university to study social work. "Grandma, I want to continue your work." "My dear, you won't be continuing my work. You'll be doing your own work, better than mine. But I want to use everything I've learned from you. And you should. But you should also bring your own ideas, your own way of seeing the world." Richard, now 45, had become one of the most respected businessmen in the country, not for what he accumulated, but for what he gave away. His company was a global example of corporate social responsibility. Jennifer, at 32, managed a network of 400 foundations and was frequently consulted by governments on public policies to fight poverty. Kevin had become the national director of the network, coordinating projects across the country. Mike led the Florida Foundation and trained new regional coordinators. Mary had created a financial transparency system, ensuring every donated dollar reached those in need. Anthony coordinated vocational training programs across the Northeast. But despite all the success, what made Grace proudest was seeing her family remain united and humble. "Mrs. Grace," Richard said during one of their monthly family meetings, "you saved far more than my life that day in the wasteland." "How so?" "You saved my soul, my family, and the lives of over 1 million people, all because you decided to offer water to a stranger." "Richard, you're being too dramatic. I just did what had to be done." "But that's exactly what makes you special. For you, helping is natural. It's not calculation, not strategy, not publicity. It's who you are." Emma, now a thoughtful young woman, interrupted. "Grandma, I have a serious question." "What is it, dear?" "If that day in the wasteland you had just kept driving without stopping to help Uncle Richard, what would have happened?" Grace thought for a moment. "He probably would have been found by someone else. Maybe later, maybe the next day. But would all these changes have happened?" "I don't know, dear. Maybe not." "So you're saying over 1 million people have better lives today because you chose to stop and help that day?" "When you put it like that, it's amazing how one small choice can change the world." Richard nodded. "Emma, your grandmother always says small acts of kindness create ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine." "It's true," Grace said. "We never know the real impact of a good deed. That's why it's important to always do good, even when it seems insignificant." The end. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. Do you believe small acts of kindness can truly change lives? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.